Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm PRWeek's news editor, Siobhan Holt. Today I'm joined by PRWeek's UK editor, John Harrington. Hi, John.
Hi, Siobhan.
Well, you may have seen that there's been a lot of leadership change in agency land over recent weeks. There was a surprising announcement, some might say, that Mark Reed is to step down from his role as UK CEO at WPP at the end of the year. And there's also been top-level changes at Edelman, MSL, FTI, Weber, FleishmanHillard and Hotwire. What is driving the change in leadership? So to discuss this hot topic, we're joined today by our guest, EMEA, who is a partner at Hanson Search, which is a headhunting consultancy specialised in recruiting C-suite business leaders in the comms industry. Thanks for joining us today, Amy.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's begin. I'm going to fire away with my first question. So what's the market like out there for the CEO level leaders at agencies?
I mean, it's tough. It's a really tough market. And I think, it's also a volatile market. And it's been like this relentlessly since the pandemic, really. When you've been at those senior levels, you've had to really pivot around change and transformation, whether that's to do with how do we manage lockdown? What does this even mean? There's just been lots of times over the last sort of 5 years, whether it has been geopolitical crisis, you've got clients cutting back on spending. And I think CEOs have been in a position where they have to sort of steady the ship. But in very volatile markets, that's been quite tricky and quite challenging for them. And I think a lot of them, when you speak to a lot of these holding companies, have put quite hefty targets and quite what some of the CEOs may feel as unrealistic targets on their head. And they've had to make really tough decisions. And so it's not been, I think a lot of them have found it just like they're constantly always on, and many of them have had sleepless nights. And I think we're getting to a point now, maybe even, that burnout is quite rife within the market, especially at that level where they just go, this has been non-stop. And when are we going to get a moment to breathe? Going from lockdown right through to clients cutting spending. Now AI is innovating and changing how we operate, and we've got to pivot and learn. I think they found it quite challenging.
Yeah, I could really imagine it. It does feel like the kind of perma-crisis era that's been there since at least COVID, and arguably a bit before then, hasn't really gone away. And I can see why a lot of people are on edge at the moment. So do you sort of feel that it could be a kind of mix of sort of push and pull factors when it comes to people leaving their top jobs? I mean, as you say, there is that sense of burnout, I'm sure, that's there among the top leadership. But at the same time, if some agency bosses are struggling to get results, then it might be that the companies themselves might look elsewhere. What do you think the balance is at the moment?
I think they're all very individual cases, but I see both cases in different types of businesses. So I think for some CEOs have gone, well, look, I've given it my best, and I just feel that I'm not being able to have the power, the authority. I've not been given the resources to produce the results that are needed, and I've given it my best. And actually, maybe it is time for me to step back and see if someone else can bring around change, bring around different kind of thinking, different type of leadership. But then I also think on the flip side, where they have found that they've struggled in being in quite a big global network or got a lot of red tape around them, that there is an attraction of moving to somewhere that is either a bit smaller, that is looking to transition, if it's an independent business that's looking to be bought, or people going into consultancy and NED type roles as well at this level. So I think it's a real balance. I don't think as one size fits all, but we're certainly going through a period of change where people are really reevaluating what's really important to them, and if they feel like they can be successful in their roles, because it's constantly been changing, and the goalposts keep moving, and the different challenges that are in the market at the moment, there doesn't seem to be a solution just yet. Everyone's still finding their way.
And you talk about there that sort of looking for skills. I'm just wondering what skills then and career experience are agencies looking for in their UK CEOs right now?
Like we said, it's a tough position to be in. I think the biggest thing that you're seeing, if we're talking more global network and holding companies, they want people that are really commercially savvy. They want people who are willing to make quite tough decisions and can look at obstacles, challenges, and be quite solutions focused and kind of think around, well, how can we adapt? How can we get around that? But also still needing people to be quite human. I think still being able to sit around the C-suite table and, have quite facts and figures conversations, but then be able to be a good kind of spokesperson for the people of the agencies that they are in and be able to engage with them at all levels and listen to their senior leadership team and feed that back in, because everybody will always say a business will only be as successful as its people. So you need to retain good staff and you need to continue to create a good culture. So you need to be that sort of human-led senior leader. But at the same time, I think as a holding company who are looking to make a hire, they want someone who's quite commercially savvy and can bring around change and steady a ship.
Are they also looking maybe for any knowledge in tech if industry is moving forwards with AI?
Yeah, I think so, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO that has that. You know, if the CEO can bring in a team or knows, okay, I have an understanding of this, but we need to bring in specialists. But yeah, I think the thing is everyone's still working it out. They're still trying to figure out what AI is going to mean for their business, how it's going to really transform the roles of the individuals that they currently employ. But also, you know, somebody who understands client needs and what clients want. And some clients are still a little bit hesitant around what AI and what that would do for their business and what it means, whereas some are really embracing it. So I think on the tech side, it's less around being an expert in that field or really understanding it, but having to bring in the right people around you who can investigate that and understand what it's going to mean for your business.
I thought it was interesting, actually. You mentioned understanding what client needs. Obviously, the UK's biggest PR agency, Burson, recently hired someone whose background for the last 15 years was in-house, Simon Redfern. And equally, we had news this week that Ruth Warder, UK CEO at Edelman, is herself going in-house to Chanel. I find it fascinating. Do you think that there's a sense that, on the one hand, agencies are so keen to know what it's like from the insider point of view that actually there's a real benefit now, maybe even more so than there was before, in getting people from that in-house background? But at the same time, the sort of counter can be true as well, that maybe some in-house teams want a bit of the agency know-how too. What are your views on that?
I think we're going through a period where everybody's trying to learn and figure out what the new way of comms and marketing is. And so I think what you're seeing is agencies go, well, we've tried this, let's try something different. Let's look outside of the box. But Simon has had agency experience prior to his recent, so he does understand, you know, it's not bringing somebody who doesn't have that sort of background, because I don't think I've ever made a senior hire before of someone who is purely from an in-house background at such a level. But I do think it's probably more of a sense of, well, maybe it is time for change. Maybe it's a time to go, well, we're all navigating a way through this and we kind of got to see through the fog a little bit, and bringing in skills that they think could add value from a different perspective. I think when you speak to clients on the in-house side, what I do tend to find is they've got to a point where they've all got a bit fed up with working with certain bigger agencies, and they're not getting anything new, they're not getting anything innovative. And what they're finding is, because we did go through a period after the pandemic where lots of people got promoted very quickly, there was a real kind of war on talent, and there was a real kind of sense of people were getting over promoted very quickly. And what we saw was actually in-house teams go, well, we were working with a really senior MD, and now we've been given a director with 8 years worth of experience. We're not necessarily getting the level of expertise that we're paying for and that we would expect. And also a lot of the stuff that we're seeing has been churned out and has been done before. We're not getting fresh thinking, we're not getting new ideas. So we did start to see a lot of in-house companies go, well, actually, I'd rather partner with a very kind of senior strategic-led small consultancy, or with a senior kind of consultant themselves, to get the sort of strategy and the strategic thinking, and then look at hiring maybe a smaller agency to do the execution or different teams. So I think there is something to kind of be said around like the changing needs of what clients are looking for and what businesses are looking for, because it seems like where the agency model shifted when we all went to kind of one P&L, one stop shop for all, that all kind of clients wanted one agency that could do everything for them. We've certainly kind of moved away from that in terms of kind of cost-cutting exercises. But in terms of CEOs going into in-house, I think people want change. It's been a very stagnant, very stale market in a sense of opportunity, learning, growth. I think it's been challenging, it's been quite difficult. And I think people sometimes, and this is at all levels to be fair, sometimes people feel the grass is greener on the other side, and that's what they're looking for. They just want something a bit different.
You talk about trends there. We have noticed as well that there's sort of a move towards more corporate experience being incorporated in some of these moves. So I was just wondering, is it a background in consumer, corporate, tech PR, or is it senior finance roles? What are the sort of trends that you are seeing across the board?
I don't really see there as a trend in terms of sector experience. I think reputation management has definitely been flying quite high since the pandemic, when it all very much came to around internal reputation and external reputation. So I guess you could sort of say corporate. I think policy public affairs as well in the current climate, that's also a key skill. But I think the sector experience is probably less relevant in terms of the skills, as opposed to having someone who is commercially savvy and has got experience in running large global business.
One thing I think we're seeing less of now than we used to is the promotion of people already in the agency to the boss of the agency. Is that something you're seeing generally? And do you think that might be linked to what you're talking about earlier around big holding companies just wanting change?
Yeah. So I think when we're looking at sort of promotions and stuff, I think I'd put them in two separate camps. So you've got your big global networks, and we've seen promotions across the whole of the business where they've gone from 2 promotion cycles a year to 1. I also think that CEOs don't want to be seen to be or senior leadership even don't want to be seen to be taking promotions when they are having to make restructures and redundancies. I don't think that kind of gives the right internal message. And I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say sensitivity, but there's a lot of people within the business at all levels looking at that senior leadership that are scared, don't know what kind of the change means. They don't have that sense of security. So I don't think when you're making all of these restructure changes to then kind of promote, if you like, internally at senior leadership doesn't always send the right message. So I think a lot of companies have been quite aware of that. I think what I hear a lot in the market as well is even those that are one step away from CEO, they don't necessarily want the job. They don't. They look at it and go, do I want that stress? Do I want that headache? Like, do I want to be in a position where actually I can't make much change? We're in times now where the capability and the ability to work autonomously has been taken away to some degree because they feel they're not hitting targets, they're underperforming, share price has gone down. So I think a lot of individuals are therefore kind of not necessarily aspiring to want to take in that CEO position during a time where they can look up to people who inspire them, they've worked with for a long time, really admire, and they sort of look at it and go, well, if he can't do it, how am I supposed to do it?
Wow. Yeah, this is a trend I remember reading about in the jobs market generally of, I don't know if it was millennials or Gen Z, moving away from what previously was just the natural career path where you just move up and up and up and then you want to get to that top job. But actually, maybe they see the impact that it's having on their boss and they think, yeah, I don't really want that.
Yeah, there's definitely a generational shift of like what they value, and if they value the job title and the package, or do they value work-life balance and mental health. I think we've definitely seen that in the people up and coming in their careers. But I do also think people get to a certain point in their career and they sort of go, like, do I want to put my family through this as well? I'm going to be traveling lots. I'm going to be working internationally. I'm going to be at the beck and call of my mobile. Is that really what I want? And to have actually the pressure of the targets. And also, if you put yourself in such a visible position, everyone's going to be looking to you for the answers. And at the moment, we're in a market where we don't really know what the answers are.
Absolutely. Do you think there's also a sense that some of the big companies might have shot themselves in the foot a little bit by their return to the office mandates?
That's a really tricky one to say, because I think we've gone through an evolution of hybrid working and what that means for culture. And I think for some people and for some businesses, they might go, actually, yes, we are spending so much money on these offices and we want to spend more money in terms of investing and training and developing our teams. And we'd love to do that together and bring everybody together. And so that's why they've gone, well, actually, the only way we can really encourage on mass scale is to say, everybody come back into the office. But at the same time, a lot of these businesses aren't equipped because they've downsized, they don't have enough desks. Like, it doesn't, physically it wouldn't work to have everybody back in the office when you've put holding companies all together in buildings. I think there has been some drive even at more junior levels where they say, like, I want to be in the office, I want to learn, I want to develop, I want more visibility from a senior leadership team. But at the same time, I don't think the solution is to go back to how things were before, because that's not how people operate. That's not how comms operates. That's just not how the world operates anymore. It's not how your clients operate. So there's definitely need to work around what's right. But there's also theories of or should we say tell everyone to come back to work, and those that don't want to, then it's an easier way to kind of cut costs rather than having to do a restructure. People will naturally leave, and that's another thing that we've sort of seen is people go, well, this isn't going to work for me, so they leave. So it saves having to look at a restructure again.
That's a good point. It does sort of strike me that, having spoken to quite a few very senior people in the last couple of years who've moved away to have more of a sort of consultancy, sort of mixed portfolio career type thing. And obviously, this isn't new in itself. People have been doing this for a long time, but it just does seem as though there's more. And I wonder if there seems to be more of, maybe I'm overthinking this a little bit, but that kind of cult of personal branding on LinkedIn and so on seems to be a bit more of a thing. It's almost like you see some sort of senior people who worked in an agency and then they become these kind of
life coaches,
influencers, life coaches, and all of this. And I could definitely see a sense there's more of an opportunity to do that than there was a little while ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the choice to sort of do more of the strategic consultancy or the, like you said, the portfolio career is also to reflect client needs. Like I mentioned earlier, what we hear from a lot of in-house teams is, I don't want to hire a big shiny agency that can do everything for me. I need a strong senior leader who I can spar with, who I can have, really brainstorm good ideas, that understands my business. And they sort of take that time to really invest in them, and they know they've got all of their attention. They don't have someone with half the years of experience that costs them the same amount of money. So I think there has been more opportunity for senior leaders who are able to go to clients that they've either worked with before and work with them on more of a consultative basis part-time. And then the other thing to consider is, now that AI is being incorporated into the creative industry even more so, a lot of these in-house teams are thinking, well, how can we build our own AI teams that we can take the strategy from a senior-led person and do the tactics and the execution ourselves, which will cost a lot less for them. So I do think a lot of the time when we look at the movements that are happening in agencies, it's usually a reflection of what's going on in the clients and what's the demand from in-house teams.
Absolutely.
We mentioned there a hot topic of working practices and 5 days a week. Another one that's obviously hit the industry hard is the impact from rollbacks on businesses on D&I initiatives. And I was just wondering, as a result of Trump's policies in the US, was this happening over here? Have you noticed maybe a change in approach for people hiring?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it reflects, again, depending what brands and what companies are asking for and doing as well, and what was genuinely authentic and part of a company brand and what was just tokenism and we'll just lend a little bit of lip service to. So I actually sit on the PRCA's Equity Advisory Board as well. And so we've just recently been doing some work around brands pulling back from pride. And a lot of it, therefore, is a lot of clients, a lot of agency clients. Before, DEI initiatives, sustainability, mental health, all of that was part of the RFPs. We're starting to see that kind of get stripped out, and it's not necessarily in there as much. So if your clients aren't asking for it and they're not concerned whether you have got a diverse team working on their account or not, then agencies, as much as they said they were committed, may now think, well, actually, it's not a key priority. And actually, if you're looking at restructuring teams, looking at cutting costs, unfortunately, things like DI initiatives are being pulled back on. But I also think agencies are trying to balance that with what they do internally as well. So they might still continue to invest in certain initiatives. They might still champion workshops and there's still a focus of needing to make sure internally that their business still feels like a safe and secure environment for people to bring their individual self to the business. But I don't think they necessarily champion it as much externally to win business or to bring new clients on board or to challenge their clients on briefs.
Interesting, thank you. I just wonder if you've got any predictions really of what we might see coming down the line when it comes to the types of CEOs that we'll be getting in agencies over the year ahead or so, or do you think it will be more of the same and an acceleration?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to go through a time where agencies need to differentiate themselves in the market. I think we've got to a point where they all look to each other and mirror what each other are doing. And I think now that AI is changing very much how they work, how they operate with clients, what their services are, I think we will definitely see them all try to work out their own way of doing that. And I think that's the key thing, is to differentiate themselves in the market. I think certainly over the last sort of few years or so, you wouldn't be able to tell any CV. That CV could be for someone who is in an Omnicom or a WPP or an IPG. They all read the same. It would just be the client brands that are different. But I would hope that for the future that we could get to a place where actually agencies find their own kind of space in the market and can differentiate themselves in terms of their service offering. And I think what we will continue to see is a lot more kind of hopefully sort of more independent businesses, a lot of more senior led independent businesses that will come through off the back of people going, I just want to rip up the rule book and do it myself and do it in the best way that I know how and what I think is really going to add value to service clients. I think we definitely went through a period of lots of acquisitions and lots of mergers to the point now that certainly a ripe economy to bring something different to the market, and it's always easier to do that on smaller scale than it is large scale.
Well, that's all we have for this week's episode. Thanks to Amy for coming on PRWeek's podcast, and thanks for listening. Bye for now.